He gave his last horse to the wounded Apache girl. At sunrise, her sisters came. The man had lived on the edge of the land for many years, far from the noise of town and far from other people. His ranch sat where dry grass met broken hills, a place most folks passed without stopping. Life had not been kind to him, but he was used to that. He woke before the sun every day, worked until his back ached, and slept when the stars were high. He did not complain. He believed that a man should endure what comes and keep moving forward. Once he had more than this. Years ago, the ranch had been fuller. There were more animals, more land, and sometimes even laughter. But drought came, then debt, then loss one after another. Some cattle were sold to pay bills. Some wandered off and never came back. A bad winter took more than he expected. Little by little, everything slipped through his hands. In the end, only one horse remained. That horse was old but strong, with calm eyes and steady steps. The man depended on it for everything, checking fences, carrying water, traveling to the nearest town miles away. Without the horse, the ranch would fail. He knew that very well. Still, he treated the animal with care, brushing its coat every evening and speaking to it like a friend. In many ways, the horse was the last proof that he was still holding on. That evening, the sky was turning orange and purple as he rode along the far edge of his land. He liked to check the fence before nightfall. Coyotes were known to slip through broken wire, and repairs were easier to plan in daylight. The air was quiet except for the soft sound of hooves on dirt and the wind moving through dry weeds. As he neared a shallow canyon, something caught his eye. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or a stray calf. He slowed the horse and looked again. What he saw made him stop completely. Near the rocks, half hidden by shadow, lay a small figure. It did not move. The man felt a tight pull in his chest. He dismounted carefully and walked closer, one hand resting on his belt out of habit. As he stepped nearer, he realized it was a girl, young and badly hurt. Her clothes were torn and there was dried blood on her side. Her breathing was shallow and her skin was pale. She was Apache. He knew it from the patterns on her clothing and the beads tangled in her dark hair. For a long moment he stood there, unsure what to do. Helping her would not be simple. People talked. Rumors spread fast in small places. Some neighbors already looked at him with suspicion because he kept to himself. Taking in an injured Apache girl could bring trouble, questions from authorities, anger from locals, or worse. He also knew the land was dangerous at night. Cold temperatures, wild animals, and her injuries would end her life before morning if she stayed there. Leaving her felt wrong in a way he could not ignore. He knelt beside her and spoke softly, though he was not sure she could hear him. Her eyes fluttered open for a second, dark and filled with fear. She tried to move, then cried out in pain. The sound cut through him like a blade. That was when he made his decision. Carefully, he lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, as if hunger and injury had already taken much from her. He carried her to the horse, secured her as best he could, and walked the rest of the way back to the cabin, leading the horse slowly so she would not be shaken. The cabin was small, one room, a rough table, a bed, and a stove that barely worked. He laid her down gently and cleaned her wound with water and cloth. He did not have much medicine, but he did what he could, tearing his own shirt to make bandages. She did not speak, but she watched him, her eyes never leaving his face. Night settled around the cabin. The wind howled outside and the walls creaked. He sat near the stove, keeping watch, afraid she might stop breathing if he looked away. He wondered where she had come from and how she had ended up alone and injured in that canyon. He also wondered what would happen next. Deep down, he knew this moment would change everything. Before dawn, she stirred and tried to sit up. He gently told her to rest. She spoke a few words in a low voice he did not understand, then fell quiet again. When morning light finally crept through the small window, he knew she needed to reach her people soon. Staying longer would only bring danger to both of them. He stepped outside and looked at his horse standing calmly near the post. A heavy truth settled over him. If he gave her the horse, she might survive. If he kept it, she might not. He closed his eyes for a moment, knowing the choice ahead would cost him more than anyone would ever understand. Morning came slowly, like the land itself was unsure whether to wake up. Pale light slipped through the small cabin window and rested on the girl's face. She was still breathing, but each breath looked like effort. The man had not slept. He sat on a wooden chair all night, listening to the wind, the crackle of dying embers in the stove, and the faint sound she made when pain stirred her awake. When the sun finally rose, he stood and stretched his stiff back. His body ached, but his mind felt heavier. He knew what needed to be done, even if he did not want to admit it yet. He brought water and helped the girl drink a little. She struggled at first, then swallowed slowly. Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was something more than fear in them. There was awareness. She spoke softly, a few broken words in English. Not many, but enough. "Horse home," she whispered. He nodded. "Yes, I know." Helping her stay longer was not safe. People rode past his land sometimes. Questions would come, and even if no one saw her, her wound needed more care than he could give. Her people would know what to do. He stepped outside and looked at the wide land stretching in every direction. The nearest town was far. Without the horse, even reaching help for himself would be almost impossible. He leaned against the fence and pressed his hand to his forehead. The horse stood quietly nearby, flicking its tail, unaware of the decision forming around it. He returned inside and began preparing. He packed what little food he could spare: dried meat, bread wrapped in cloth, and a small water skin. He tightened the bandage on her side and helped her sit up slowly. She winced but did not cry out. When he lifted her, he felt how weak she was. Still, she held herself with pride, even in pain. Outside, he placed her gently on the horse and adjusted the reins so they would not slip. He showed her how to sit steady, though he could tell she already knew. Before she rode away, she looked back at him. Her eyes filled with emotion she could not fully express in words. She pressed her hand to her chest, then toward him, a quiet sign of thanks. He nodded once, unable to speak. Then she turned the horse and rode east, toward the hills and the rising sun. The man stood there long after she disappeared into the distance. The dust settled. The sound of hooves faded. Silence returned, thicker than before. Only then did the full weight of what he had done sink in. Without the horse, the days became hard immediately. Simple tasks took twice the time. Carrying water from the well left his arms shaking. Walking the fence lines burned his legs. By the second day, blisters formed on his hands and feet. Neighbors noticed. One stopped by and asked where the horse was. The man gave a short answer, saying only that it was gone. The neighbor shook his head and muttered something about foolish choices before riding away. At night, the man lay awake on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Doubt crept in. He wondered if he had been reckless. He wondered if kindness had finally pushed him too far. But every time he questioned himself, he remembered her face in the canyon and the sound of her cry. That memory silenced the doubt, even if it did not ease the hardship. On the third day, clouds gathered and the air grew heavy. He worked through the afternoon, sweat soaking his shirt. Without the horse, he could not check the far fence. He could not reach town for supplies. He accepted that loss as the price of his choice. As the sun dipped low, he sat on the cabin steps, exhausted. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He watched the horizon, though he did not know why. Maybe part of him hoped. Maybe another part feared what might come. Night fell again. The wind carried distant sounds across the land, animals, shifting grass, and something else he could not place. He told himself it was nothing and went inside. Before dawn, a sound reached him that made him sit up straight. Hooves, not one set, many. His heart began to pound. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside as the sky lightened with the first hint of morning. In the distance, dark shapes moved together, riding toward his land. He stood still, waiting, unsure whether this moment would bring reward or consequence. The night after he heard the distant sound did not bring answers. When the man stepped outside, the land lay quiet again, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. The sky was pale and wide, and the stars were slowly fading. He stood there for a long time listening, but only the wind replied. Whatever he had heard was gone. He returned inside, unsure whether to feel relief or worry. That day stretched longer than the ones before it. Without the horse, every task felt heavier. He moved slowly, careful not to waste energy. The sun climbed high, and the heat pressed down on the land. Dust clung to his boots and skin. His throat felt dry, but he rationed his water carefully. He had learned long ago that panic never helped a man survive. Still, his thoughts would not stay quiet. He kept seeing the girl's face in his mind. He wondered where she was now. He imagined her riding through the hills, fighting pain with every movement. He hoped she had reached her people. He hoped she was safe. Not knowing was the hardest part. By afternoon, his hands shook from effort. He rested under the small shade of the cabin wall, breathing slowly until the weakness passed. A part of him whispered that he had been foolish. That voice grew louder as hunger settled in his stomach. He had enough food for a few days, maybe a week if he was careful. After that, things would become uncertain. Neighbors passed his land once that day. They did not stop. He watched them ride by, their horses moving easily over ground he now crossed on foot. He wondered what they said about him when he was not around. He knew rumors traveled faster than truth. As evening came, clouds gathered again, dark and heavy, but no rain fell. The land stayed dry, thirsty, waiting. He cooked a small meal and ate slowly, listening to the wind scrape against the cabin walls. The silence felt louder than any noise. That night, sleep came in short pieces. He woke often, listening for sounds that might not exist. Each time he opened his eyes, he half expected to see someone standing in the doorway. Each time, there was nothing. On the fourth morning, his body felt worn down, but his mind was sharp. He stepped outside and scanned the horizon. The land looked the same as it always had, endless and quiet. If something was coming, it was not ready to show itself yet. He worked the day through, though his pace slowed. Without the horse, some fences remained unchecked. He marked the places in his mind, hoping he would return to them someday. The thought felt uncertain. As the sun lowered, a strange feeling settled over him. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Like the land itself was holding its breath. He told himself it was just exhaustion, that hunger played tricks on the mind. When night fell, he sat on the cabin steps and watched the stars appear one by one. He thought about his past, about the choices that had led him here. He had lost many things in his life, but he had never lost his sense of right and wrong. Even now, with his future uncertain, he did not regret helping her. That thought surprised him with its strength. Before dawn, the air changed. It grew cooler, sharper. He woke from a light sleep with his heart beating fast, though he could not say why. He sat up listening. At first, there was only silence. Then, very faintly, the sound returned. Not close enough to see. Not loud enough to be sure, just enough to make his breath catch. He rose slowly, pulled on his coat, and stepped outside as the first line of light touched the horizon. The land ahead was still, but the feeling remained. Something was coming, and whatever it would soon cross the line between waiting and truth. The light of morning crept slowly across the land, turning the sky pale gold. The man stood outside his cabin, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed on the open ground ahead. He did not move. He did not call out. He simply waited, listening with every part of himself. Then the sound became clear. Hooves, many of them. They came from the east, steady and calm, not rushed, not careless. The rhythm was controlled, practiced. Whoever was riding knew this land well. The man felt his chest tighten. He had no weapon in his hands, only the dust under his boots and the quiet strength of standing his ground. As the riders came closer, shapes formed out of the morning haze. Horses moved in a wide line, their heads high, their steps sure. On their backs rode Apache women, strong, upright, and watchful. Their presence filled the space without noise or threat. At the front rode a familiar figure. It was the girl. She sat tall on the horse, her posture steady. The wound that once nearly took her life was now bound cleanly. Her face, once pale and weak, held color again. When her eyes met the man's, something warm passed between them, recognition, relief, and respect. The riders slowed and stopped a short distance from the cabin. No one spoke at first. The wind moved gently through the grass. The horses stood calm, as if they sensed no danger here. The girl dismounted carefully and walked forward. Her steps were slow but sure. When she reached him, she placed her hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly. Then she stepped aside. One of the older women came forward. Her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes sharp but kind. She spoke in clear, careful English. "You helped our sister," she said. "You did not know her, you did not owe her, but you helped." The man nodded once. "She was hurt," he replied simply. "Anyone would have done the same." The woman shook her head gently. "No, not everyone." She turned, and another rider led his horse forward. Tied to the reins was the man's horse, the same one he had given away. The animal stepped toward him and snorted softly, as if happy to see him again. For the first time in days, the man felt his throat tighten. "We bring back what was given," the woman said, "and more than that." Other women dismounted and moved toward the cabin. They worked without asking, fixing loose boards, tightening fence wire, checking the well. One carried a bundle of food and set it on the small table inside. Another brought clean cloth and medicine made from plants the man had never seen before. The girl watched him as all this happened. When the work was done, she stepped closer. "I live because of you," she said quietly. "My sisters ride because of you." He looked at her, unsure what to say. Words felt too small for the moment. He finally spoke. "I just did what felt right." She smiled at that. The women did not stay long. When the sun rose fully, they gathered again. Before leaving, the older woman spoke once more. "This land will be respected," she said. "You will not be alone here." Then they mounted their horses and rode away, the sound of hooves fading into the morning. The man stood still long after they were gone. The ranch looked the same, yet everything felt different. He placed his hand on his horse's neck and breathed out slowly. For the first time in a long while, the future did not feel empty. The sun climbed higher, and he returned to his work, not as a man who had lost everything, but as one who had gained something no drought could take away. After the riders disappeared beyond the hills, the land slowly returned to its usual quiet. The wind moved through the dry grass, and a single bird circled high above. The man remained where he was, standing in the same spot, as if the ground beneath his feet needed time to believe what had just happened. He walked to his horse and rested his hand on its neck. The animal shifted slightly, warm and solid, real. He let out a long breath he felt he had been holding for days. Only now did he realize how close he had been to losing hope. He went inside the cabin and looked around. The place was still small and worn, but something had changed. The loose boards had been fixed. The table held fresh food. Clean cloth and simple medicine sat neatly near the stove. It was not wealth, but it was care. It was proof that his kindness had not vanished into the empty land. He sat down and ate slowly. Each bite felt heavier than hunger alone. It carried meaning. He thought about the girl, about the fear in her eyes when he found her, and the strength he saw when she returned. He understood now that help given freely has a way of returning in forms no one can predict. The days that followed were different, though nothing dramatic happened. He worked as he always had, but his steps felt lighter. The fences held. The well stayed clean. The horse carried him across the land again, steady and patient. Sometimes, when he rode near the canyon, he paused and looked toward the rocks where he had first seen her. The memory stayed with him, quiet but powerful. Neighbors began to change too. One stopped by and spoke more kindly than before. Another asked if he needed help repairing a fence. No one mentioned the riders, but something had shifted. Respect does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it settles in slowly like dawn. On certain mornings, he noticed signs near the edge of his land, tracks where there should have been none. A fence repaired before he reached it. Once, fresh water left near his well. No one ever appeared and no words were spoken, but he understood. He was not alone anymore. As weeks passed, the season turned. The heat softened. The sky brought clouds that promised rain. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he sat on the porch and watched the light stretch across the land. He thought about the life he had lived, how much he had lost, and how close he had come to giving up. He realized something important then. The hardest times had not broken him. They had shaped him. And when the moment came to choose between fear and doing what was right, he had chosen without hesitation. That choice had cost him something, yes, but it had also returned something greater. He never told the story in full. When asked about his horse or the repairs, he answered simply. Those who needed to understand did. Those who did not never asked again. Years later, travelers passing through sometimes spoke of a quiet ranch where the land felt calm, where trouble seemed to pass by instead of stopping. Some said it was luck. Others said it was the man who lived there. He continued waking before sunrise, working until his body told him to rest. The difference was not in his routine, but in his heart. He no longer felt like a man waiting for loss. He felt like a man who had already faced it and survived. And every sunrise, when the light touched the hills, he remembered the sound of hooves and the lesson it carried. That doing the right thing, even when it costs everything, can return more than a man ever expects.